Our lesson today is prayer stops the growth of evil, and it is the seed of life. God's plan regarding humanity is for the good, even though we experience the presence of evil in our everyday lives. There are two stories from Genesis that describe the emergence and expansion of evil and sin across successive generations. In the first chapters of Genesis is the well-known story of Adam and Eve. In doubting God's intentions, their hearts yield to the temptation of the evil one through the serpent. However, the experience goes in the opposite direction of where they had expected it. Their eyes were opened, and they discovered that they are naked. The second, from Genesis 4, is the story of Cain and Abel. Cain is envious of his brother and sees him as a rival for everything. Evil enters his heart, and Cain does not succeed in controlling it, thus leading to his murder. Though Cain's descendants develop arts and crafts, violence develops as well. We too still experience the presence of wickedness in the world, nearly every day for some of the faithful. In this third account from the Bible, one that is less apparent, humbler, and devout, this represents the redemption of hope, the story involving Abel, Seth, Enoch, and Noah, who acted humbly and prayed to God with sincerity. These four men who pray in the first pages of the Bible as peacemakers, their prayer is authentic, which liberates it from the instinct toward violence. Authentic prayer is a gaze directed toward God so that he might return to take care of the human heart. Adding that prayer cultivates flower beds of rebirth in places where human hatred was only capable of sowing a desert. There was a head of government in the past who proclaimed himself an atheist. He said that, quote, he had no religious sense in his heart, close quote. But he remembered listening to his grandmother praying when he was a child. At a difficult time in his life, that memory came back to his heart, and he began to pray the words used long ago by his grandmother. There, he found Jesus waiting for him, with his arms open in love, accepting him back into the flock. Prayer is a chain of life. Prayer is a seed of life, and that is why it is so important to teach children to pray. It hurts my heart to see children who do not know how to make the sign of the cross. We of the faithful must help the young parents to teach their children to pray. Then, perhaps, they can forget, take another path, but that one remains buried in their heart, because it is a seed of life. It is the seed of dialogue with God. For this reason, throughout history, righteous men and women of prayer, often misunderstood or marginalized, have ceaselessly offered up intercession for the world, invoking God's power to bring about healing and growth. The world lives and grows thanks to God's power that these servants of His attract through their prayer. It is through these servants of God that His path and story are passed down to the remnant of humanity who have asked that He transform their hearts of stone to hearts of flesh once again. May it happen before those hearts of stone stop beating altogether. And as these people return to Christ, speaking of a personal event, my father left the church decades ago. But about 10 years ago, he rejoined. For all the years that my mother, his ex-wife, had prayed that this would happen, for all the years that I dared not pray it would happen, though he walked me up the aisle in a Catholic church for my wedding, and he sat and participated in all the prayers, and the same at his mother's funeral, his brother's funeral, and he dared joke, maybe I should rejoin the church. I'm getting so much practice at all these funerals now. He did rejoin the church. One of his mates from school was a priest. Ironically, that priest, we'll call him John, had been my boss when I worked for 6 of the 8.5 years that I worked for the church. Talk about some really interesting boundaries there. Because whoever was your boss was your confessor. Yep, there goes some interesting boundaries there. So, when I left that church, it was a very, very negative experience because people were telling untruths. They were violating the commandment. And they were wholeheartedly speaking against me. And even those people who I had worked, prayed, and eaten meals in fellowship for years and years and years every Sunday, they decided they'd be friends with my husband, who had only converted to Catholicism, to marry me. Well, and his mistress in the choir with me didn't really think twice about it. And here I was working 160 hours a week. Yeah, count that up. And that was to keep his business afloat. So I did not feel so kindly towards the church. But I then developed my own brand, my own version of Christianity, Catholicism, so that I only had contact with the priests, and I fired a few of those from my church. But when John said that DJ and he did Mass together at least once or twice a week, I was astonished. There were others in their class that had become priests too. They were past retirement, and so one of them would almost daily say a Mass with DJ, my dad. And he was so proud. He was so happy. Christ still loved him, he told me. He said as soon as I went to that first Mass and then confessed, he said, I felt so happy. He said everything was not wonderful in my life, but he said all I could feel was happiness, Annie. Just happiness. And I gave him a great big hug, tears streaming down my face. And I said, Papa, I am so very proud of you. And I said, I hope your next confession is truthful. And we both started laughing. That was always a joke that he said his first confession had to be outside. That way he wouldn't burn down the church. So Dad was a real reasonable fellow. But when he received the diagnosis this time, he wasn't afraid. He wasn't afraid at all, because he knew he was living a righteous life. And even after being away from the church for more than 50 years, he could say, I am a Christian. I know Christ in my daily life. I love Christ, and I will stand to defend him against anyone and anything. And that is how he died. With Christ and the assembly of all those saints. His mother, his father, and his brother. Saints, all of them standing by his head and taking him through the veil. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you.